Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here. This is going to be a quick video on how to repair any old canister filters and or power filters that you have that hang off the side. If they've started a leak or you've picked one up at a garage sale. What spawned me to do this one is a friend I know who actually bought a canister filter at a garage sale and obviously plugged it in and got it all running and found out it leaked. I explained to him how to fix it, so I figured I'd just do a quick video to show you guys how to do it in case you run into the same sort of situation. There's 4 tanks on this system. 2 bottom ones, as you can tell, have been in disuse for a while. The top 2 I use for growing out cichlids. They're also currently empty because they're all been moved out into display tanks. And the babies that are going to replace them haven't been put in yet. Now, I'm going to clean up this middle tank, and I'm going to hook up, these 3 filters once I fix them. And I'm going to run that tank with these 3 filters so it's isolated from the rest of the system, because it's also going to tie into another video series I'm planning, which is which LED strips are best for growing plants. So I want to control the variables as much as possible, so I don't really want it hooked up to the rest of the system and have risk of other stuff contaminating it. And also I plan on growing out a bunch of new guppies which I found, which are a strain that seems to live quite well and seem quite hardy. And I don't want the guppies going over the overflow, which tends to happen an awful lot when they're hooked into systems like that one. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to clean these all up and scrub off all the dirt and whatnot. You can notice that this Eheim filter has an internal heating system, which is I think really a terrible idea, because if it breaks down, you end up with having to replace the whole thing. And as you can tell on this one's really corroded. So as it turns out, I say this in the sense of full disclosure here, I only ran this one during the day when I was around, because I was kind of worried that it would short out and cause a fire. So I just left it unplugged, but it was always hooked up to the system, so it was always under at least, whatever head of water, which is not that much, I don't think, about a foot in the end, but it was always under water pressure. So what I'm going to do here is clean up that little hole at the bottom where the this spigot goes, and I'm going to put silicone around the washer, screw it into place, and that basically all it takes to fix that part if you have a leak from the bottom like that. Now for the top one, it's just as simple. Pull the O-ring off. If you don't have an O-ring, don't worry about it. And then what you do is just dry it off. It doesn't have to be really clean because the silicone's not acting as a sealant or anything in this case. It's just there to prevent water from going out, so it's acting like a washer or like this O-ring. So just clean it all off, make sure it's reasonably dry. The silicone will not stick to the plastic anyway, so when it comes time to clean it later on, you can just pull it off, remove the silicone, and then put it all back together again, and you're good to go. If it's a running system, I do recommend that you let it skin, which usually takes about 10 minutes, and then you're fine. It won't leak after that. So here I'm just running a bead all the way around. And then I'm going to put the O-ring over top of it. And like I said, if you don't have an O-ring, just use a little extra silicone and don't worry about it. And then press it down, move the silicone all the way around it. And one thing you should remember is to make sure you put all the parts back in the filter before you get to this part. You can tell by looking off to the left, right behind my left hand there. There's the bottom screen for the filter sitting there. So as soon as I get this together, I realize it and I have to take it apart and put it back together again. The other thing I recommend is if if you have good hardwood floors or whatever, and you want to use this method for a filter, and you're worried about your floors, a good idea to test it first. Like go out in the garage and get the filter running in like a bucket or whatever, and give it the same kind of hydrostatic pressure level that it will have in the tank by putting the bucket up on a shelf or something. There, I just discovered that the bottom plate wasn't in. I needed to put it back in, mostly because at this point I wasn't really realizing how long I was going to run it. So if you run it for any length of time without that plate, it just gets, all the filter just gets clogged up on the bottom. there's no even flow. So I took it off, and I'm going to re-put the silicone around the edge. It's not hard to do, just clean off the excess, make sure there's no dirt in it, because that's about the only thing that would, like bits of grit from the media, I mean. And then spread the silicone, and then put it on top. The nice thing about using silicone in this case is sometimes when you're putting these filters back together, I remember in the old days people used to say put a little bit of vegetable oil on it or something, because sometimes the O-ring will get knocked out of place when you're trying to put it through, because it's got a bit of a friction fit. But with the silicone there, it just slides right in. And there you go, that filter's all fixed. And then the power filters are twice as easy, because all there is the one little O-ring around the bottom of the filter, and you just run a little bead there, and then seat it back into place. The only thing to be careful with here is sometimes when you're putting it back together, a bit of silicone will get in the hole where the impeller is, and that what happens then is it just will may impede the ability of the impeller to start. So just pull out the little protective thing, check down in there, make sure there's nothing wrong, and then that's it. It's good to go. And what I'm going to do here is, once I fix this third filter, same process as the rest of them, I'm going to, without allowing them to cure overnight or anything, I'm going to hook it up right away, just to show you that you don't really need to let them cure. And then apparently that one had a little bit of silicone there, and I moved it out. If you're going to run them right away, it's not a big issue, because once you turn the impeller on, it will knock any uncured silicone out of the way. Of the three of them, the little one is the least likely to leak after. It has very little in the way of hydrostatic pressure, because it's the bottom ring is only going to be about 5 inches from the water line, or maybe even less depending on what level I run this at. Now, because this system is all hooked up to an overflow, I'm going to put in these two elbows, one in the input and one in the output, just so I can run the water level higher, and I don't have to worry about stuff going down into the filtration system. Now here the tank's a little more full. I'm going to hook these guys up. I'm going to prime them first by adding some water into their little reservoirs there, so it's covering the impeller. And then of course, you just turn them on, and the impeller sucks the air out of the U-tube, and you're all set to go. Now I have an extra sponge here, and actually another one for the other filter, because what I'm going to do is, well, I told you I'm breeding guppies in this, and I don't want them to get sucked into the filter and go through the impeller system. So I'm going to be slitting that sponge and putting it over the edge, over the intake pipe, just so I don't have to worry about that. Now the canister filter here is very old. I actually can't tell you how old it is. I'm not sure even why I hung on to it, but the piping and tubing that came with it, or the original fittings I should say, they were completely unusable. I suspect the pipe was so hard at this point that I wouldn't be able even to get it to not leak, even if the O-ring was fine. So I replaced all that, but because I don't have old Eheim parts, I had to kind of jury rig the input fittings and such. So you'll see once we get to that point, I just made temporary ones, because I wasn't going to keep this thing running full time or anything. These are some, well, basically spacer rings that I cut out of 1.5 PVC. I just use them to make sure that the bottom of the filter is out from the glass. That way, if these things plug up a bit and back up, and I want to make sure any water that flows out of them flows into the tank and not onto the floor. So that one's running, and you see it's nice and dry, and that one's running, and it is also dry. So there you go. Now, I have a substantial spare parts bin. What happens is, whenever I do a job, I buy elbows and various fittings, and I end up with lots of extras. So that's what I'm jury-rigged all the parts out of for putting the canister filter together. What I'm doing here is I'm just draining some water out of the old system. This ages the tank much faster that way. And what I'm going to do here is just allow it to overflow into the reservoir, so we end up with the same level of water and everything. And it just means I can hook this thing up faster. Also, those sponges, came out of the system that's on the bottom there, so they're also cured as well. So here I'm getting the system going, the canister filter, I should say. You'll also notice that there's a light on the tank now, and that's has something to do with the plants that I'm going to be growing, and those are the trays I'm going to be growing them in. That's going to be a completely other video. Hopefully it will be up soon. And then what we'll be able to do here is, as the plants grow and I test the various lights, those two filters are going to be in all those videos, and you can see, we'll see how long it lasts or how long it takes before they start leaking. What I'm doing here is, because whenever you clean a canister filter, no one ever gets all the dirt out, so what I do is just start a siphon, have it drain, and then flushes any of the dirt that's in the system out. You can see how jury-rigged this is, but all I use is silicone, and then silicone on plastic is just enough to hold it together as a friction fit, and it's more than enough for what I'm doing here. Now, unfortunately, because this filter is very old, it took me a while to get it started. You have to bang it a couple times, and that was me turning the thermostat way down as I don't want it to come on. And then finally got it going, and of course with all that shaking I stirred up more dirt, but it doesn't really matter because it's going to be a few days, or actually even a little bit longer, before this is all running. So this is the next day. The filters are still nice and dry, and as you can tell, the tank above I also have cleaned out because I've added some fish to it. And what I'm going to do here is show you a close-up. And as I said before, the canister filter does not run overnight. Like I said, I don't trust it at all. I think I turned it on and turned it off for about a full week, and during that time it never leaked, and after that I just took it apart. And there you go. Day one, still dry. Run my hand underneath, completely dry. Go over to the next one, also completely dry. And then the canister filter. The lip on the bucket, if it were leaking at all, it would just collect the water, and there's nothing there at all. And you can see the silicone on the bits and pieces there, and no water at all. So anyway, this is a quick, easy way of fixing filters, and also for joining pipes together if you're in a hurry, although I do recommend using PVC glue instead. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and please like or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And just as an added here, I'm showing you once you're done with this, you just pull the silicone off and it's all done.